Last time we talked about silence, how filling space with words weakens your influence, and how restraint builds authority. But here's the thing. You will speak eventually, and when you do, a lot of what you say may unintentionally dilute your impact. Not because you're wrong, but because you're using 10 sentences when one would hold. And every extra word slowly erodes your authority. So here's the paradox. The more you explain, the less they absorb. The more you justify, the less they respect. And the more you lecture, the less they listen. Because over-explaining doesn't develop thinking, it replaces it. When you try to connect every dot for them, you steal the cognitive reps required to build executive function. Justifying a boundary doesn't reinforce it. It invites negotiation. And when every moment becomes a lecture, your voice fades into the background noise. Words that are constant eventually lose their weight. So if the last episode was about knowing when to stay silent, this one is about knowing what to say when you decide to speak. It's not just about balance, it's about precision. Saying less so what you do say lands harder. In this episode, we're going to talk about why asking questions builds capability faster than giving answers, how to redirect without re-explaining, and why holding silence after you speak often delivers the real impact.
Our last session really dug into restraint, didn't it? The power of, knowing when to just be quiet, let silence do the work.
Yeah, that was foundational. Holding back.
But today we're kind of pivoting, moving to what feels like the next level, maybe even tougher, precision.
Exactly. Because you will speak eventually.
Right.
And when you do, those words, however few, they need to hit hard. They need maximum impact.
So if step one was realizing we talk too much, step two is making sure that when we do talk, it's efficient, powerful.
Powerful is the word. We're shifting from restraint to precision. And it's interesting.
What's that?
This feeling, this sort of obligation that you need more words, more detail, more explanation, more justification, believing that more equals better understanding.
Which sounds logical on the surface, I guess. More info, clearer picture.
Seems like it. But what the research shows, and this is something that should really make everyone listening just pause for a second, is that this impulse, it's completely backwards. It actually works against you.
Okay, so lay it out. What's the core paradox here?
The central paradox we found is, quite simply, the more you explain, the less they understand.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
That definitely pushes against common sense parenting advice, doesn't it?
It really does. Because we tend to confuse just the sheer volume of information with actual clarity of the message.
Right.
And this paradox, it comes from some pretty deep-seated mistaken beliefs, especially in relationships like parent-child or manager-employee.
Like what kind of beliefs?
Well, like believing that justifying a boundary,
right.
Giving 5 solid reasons why the screen time rule exists, that somehow that earns respect.
Or that laying out every single possible negative outcome of not doing homework is the best way to teach planning.
Exactly that. We think we're teaching foresight or building respect through logic, but the sources, they're clear. These habits, the over-explaining, the justifying neurologically, structurally, they're the fastest way to dilute your influence, to basically dull the edge of your authority.
Okay, so the mission for us today, for you listening, is really about communication efficiency, building capability. And the goal is to spot where we sabotage ourselves.
Right.
Where do our well-intentioned, maybe long-winded explanations actually end up stealing learning opportunities?
Or weakening our standing.
Yeah, weakening our influence or just turning our voice into, like you said, background noise, static.
That's it. This is really a masterclass in, speaking less, but making sure it matters a whole lot more when you do.
Finding where volume actually kills clarity.
And learning how to swap that volume for targeted, powerful precision.
Okay, let's dig into those costs then. There's 3 big negative outcomes from talking too much. And the first one, it's pretty blunt. Over-explaining equals cognitive theft. That sounds harsh. Cognitive theft. Explain the mechanics of that for me. What's being stolen?
It is harsh, isn't it? But it's also incredibly accurate, I think. Because what's being stolen is opportunity. An opportunity that's essential for their growth.
How so?
Okay, think about the neurological side of it. Every single time a parent or any authority figure lays out the entire sequence, if you do A, then B will happen. And that definitely leads to C.
Right, connecting all the dots for them.
You're basically doing all the mental heavy lifting for the learner. You are, in effect, stealing a necessary mental rep. You're preventing them from going through the cognitive struggle they need to build critical executive function.
Stealing mental reps. Okay, that's a powerful image. For you listening, can we clarify what exactly is executive function and why is that internal struggle, that rep, so important?
Sure. Executive functions, these are the sort of higher level thinking skills, mostly managed up in the prefrontal cortex. We're talking about planning, prioritizing, holding information in your working memory, controlling impulses, and connecting, future consequences to what you're doing right now. Abstract thinking.
The stuff that lets you manage yourself and your tasks.
Exactly. And a child's, or honestly, even an adult's ability in these areas, it only grows when they are forced to fire up those systems themselves. They have to be the ones connecting the dots inside their own head. They have to wrestle with the future outcome, make their own plan.
But if the solution or the consequence is just handed to them, spoon-fed through a lecture,
then that crucial part of the brain, the part responsible for foresight and planning, it just stays passive. It doesn't get the workout it needs.
So the parent is there talking and talking, maybe feeling like they're teaching responsibility, but the listener's brain is just kind of observing, waiting for the sound to stop.
Precisely. You're inadvertently building dependence, not autonomy. Let's make it concrete with the homework example. The ineffective way, the cognitive theft way, is the parent laying out every single domino. Okay, look, if you don't start your homework right now, you're going to be tired later. Then you won't get enough sleep. You'll be rushed for the bus in the morning. You might miss it. Then you'll be late for school. Your grades could suffer. And, that doesn't look good for him.
Whoa, okay. Yeah, that's exhausting just hearing it. The parent literally just mapped out the kid's next 12 hours for them.
Right. And what does the child learn from that? What's the underlying message?
That the adult handles the future. The adult worries about the consequences.
Exactly. The adult manages the consequences. My job is just to comply with the immediate instruction. The adult owns the planning. Now contrast that with the effective approach, the capability building way.
Which is?
The precise, brief statement, followed by, crucially, silence. Homework is due tomorrow. Full stop.
Ah, okay. That brevity, it puts the ball squarely in their court, doesn't it?
It forces their internal system to light up. They're immediately faced with, okay, I own this. I need to figure this out. It's due tomorrow.
So their brain has to start asking the questions.
Yes, that internal monologue kicks in, right? Due tomorrow. But I've got soccer till 5, then dinner. Where does this hour of homework fit? What do I need to shift? What maybe doesn't happen tonight? That self-directed planning, that's the real lesson in time management and prioritizing.
So the parent using fewer words is actually showing more trust, trusting the kid to figure it out.
Yes, trusting them to engage the process. And that engagement is the only way that executive function muscle actually gets built and strengthened.
Okay, but I have to push back a bit here. What about the sheer anxiety for the parent or the leader? Watching someone you care about seemingly walk right towards a cliff, a failure you can totally foresee.
Oh, absolutely.
Staying silent when you know they're going to forget the homework and get a bad grade. That feels counterintuitive, maybe even neglectful.
It feels terrifying. I get it.
Yeah.
It really requires a fundamental shift in how you see your role.
From preventer to
risk manager, maybe?
Yeah.
Your role isn't necessarily to prevent all failures. It's to manage the risk associated with potential failures so that the lesson learned is productive, not, catastrophic.
Okay. So a bad grade on homework.
That's generally a productive, informative failure. They learn something concrete about deadlines and consequences. But if your constant talking, your verbosity, prevented them from ever feeling the sting of that natural consequence,
Then what?
then you've raised someone who might know stuff theoretically, but is practically incapable of navigating life's logistics without someone constantly narrating the path ahead. You've created dependence.
Okay, that framing helps. Productive failure versus destructive failure. Okay, let's move on. From stealing mental reps to eroding authority, the next cost of talking too much. Justifying boundaries equals inviting negotiation.
Right. And this one I think is maybe even more common. It really stems from a good place, usually.
Wanting to be fair, reasonable.
Exactly. We feel like if I can just explain why this rule makes sense, if I defend it logically, then they'll respect it more. But here's the thing about true authority.
What's that?
It doesn't actually need to defend itself constantly.
So when you do explain why a boundary exists, maybe giving 3 or 4 reasons, what signal are you really sending? Unintentionally, maybe.
You're unintentionally signaling that the boundary isn't actually fixed. It's provisional. You're implying, subtly, that the rule needs outside approval to be valid specifically, the approval of the very person it's limiting.
Huh? Okay.
And by giving them, say, 5 points of justification, you've just handed them 5 potential points to argue against.
Right. You've shifted from being the one setting the boundary to being, like, a lawyer defending it in court.
Precisely. And what does the other side's lawyer do?
Looks for flaws, loopholes, inconsistencies in the argument to get leverage.
Exactly. So let's use that screen time example again. The ineffective parent, the one inviting negotiation, might say, look, you can't have screen time right now because you didn't finish your chores. And remember, chores teach responsibility. And studies show too much screen time messes with sleep. And we agreed.
Okay, I see it. The kid isn't going to debate the no screen time part. They're going straight for the because.
Instantly.
But Dad, I did empty the dishwasher. That counts. And you never said I had to sweep the porch today. That wasn't on the list. So technically, the chores are done.
And boom. You're suddenly locked in a debate about the definition of finished or the specifics of the chore list. The conversation is now about chore quality, not the screen time boundary itself.
You've been successfully sidetracked. The original boundary is kind of hanging in limbo while you argue the detail.
You got it.
Yeah.
Now, how does the precision approach, the definitive statement, cut through all that?
It just states the reality.
Yes. The effective approach is simply no screen time today. Period. Full stop.
No, because...
No. Because the boundary stands on its own. No justification is offered, which means no pathway for negotiation is opened up. By refusing to get drawn into debating the logic behind the boundary.
You teach them?
You teach them that rules are conditions. They're expectations. They're part of the landscape they have to navigate, not philosophical points they can argue their way around.
That feels like it teaches acceptance, which, like you said, is maybe more valuable long-term than just winning an argument to get compliance.
It's much more powerful. And frankly, it protects your authority.
Yeah.
Because authority that constantly has to defend itself with words, it's exhausting. It's brittle.
Whereas authority shown through quiet, clear, non-negotiable expectations.
That's robust. That's stable.
Okay. So we've got cognitive theft, invited negotiation. If those weren't bad enough, the final cost of verbosity you mentioned is maybe the simplest, but it really hit home for me. Lecturing turns your voice into white noise.
Yeah, this one taps right into basic brain function. It's about a concept called habituation.
Habituation, like getting used to something.
Exactly. The human brain is fundamentally an efficiency machine, right? It can't possibly process every single bit of sensory input coming at it with equal attention. It has to filter.
Makes sense.
So when there's a source of input that's really constant, really high volume, like a voice that is always explaining, warning, repeating, lecturing,
the brain learns to categorize it.
It learns to label that input as essentially non-critical, non-urgent. It adapts by turning down its own sensitivity to that specific sound pattern. It habituates.
So the parent's voice, even if they're yelling, literally becomes background static. The volume is loud, but the brain's filter just turns it down.
That's a great way to put it. If your normal communication volume is always cranked up to an 8 out of 10,
yeah,
the brain learns that 8 means nothing special, that basically recalibrates. Now you need a 10 just to get its attention, just to register as a real warning. You've unintentionally devalued your own communication currency through sheer frequency.
You're constantly overriding their internal pay attention system.
And this isn't just parents. Think about leaders who drone on in meetings, right? Or send those massive repetitive emails full of jargon.
Yeah, the communication volume shoots up, but the actual retention, what people remember, it tanks.
It's the law of diminishing returns, just applied to words. Consider the classic example. The kid talks back and gets the 10-minute lecture on respect.
Right. In this family, we value respect, and when I was your age, etc.
That kid isn't absorbing wisdom. They're practicing avoidance. They're learning how to mentally check out, maybe not occasionally, just waiting for the noise to stop. That's the behavior being reinforced. Endurance, not reflection.
So the effective response, the one that uses scarcity and value, it has to be completely different.
Radically different. It's about absolute precision and rarity.
Like what?
The brief core statement, we don't speak to each other that way, and then an immediate action that signals the conversation is over.
Like turning away.
Turning away, leaving the room, shifting your attention completely. That clear, short sentence, especially if your voice isn't usually used for lecturing it, lands with impact. like a little shockwave.
Because it's unusual.
Yeah.
Because it's concise.
Exactly. Because the voice is rare in that mode, it holds value. Because the message is precise, it feels urgent and clear.
Rarity equals value. That's the psychological key, isn't it? Stop the cognitive theft, stop inviting negotiation, and stop letting your own voice become wallpaper.
Okay, so we've laid out the dangers, the high costs of just talking too much. Now let's flip it. Let's talk about what actually works. Communication strategies that, instead of doing the thinking for them, actually force a listener to fire up their own problem-solving brain.
Right. Shifting focus.
And the core idea here, you said, is a power shift. Ditching the statements and embracing questions.
Yes. This is really the practical shift from, let's say, communicating dependence to actively building autonomy. And the fundamental difference is pretty stark when you think about it.
How so? Statements, especially commands or explanations, they tend to keep the listener's brain relatively passive. Why? Because the speaker is doing all the active work. The thinking, the planning, the judging.
You're basically telling them what to think or what to do. Here's the answer. Here's the plan.
Exactly. Now, contrast that with asking a genuine, open-ended question. What happens in the listener's brain?
It has to. Engage. Search for an answer.
Immediately. It forces active cognitive engagement. You're essentially shifting the burden of mental labor back onto the person who actually needs to build the skill, right? The goal here is capability, not just compliance.
Capability, not compliance. I like that. Let's use the apology example you mentioned earlier. The ineffective way is the statement, the command. You need to go apologize to your sister right now because what you said really hurt her feelings, and that's not how we treat family.
Okay, so what does that really teach the offender?
Maybe just the words to say. How to go through the motions to make the problem go away.
Precisely. It teaches the mechanics of an apology script, but it requires almost zero emotional processing or reflection on their part. They comply, sure, maybe because they fear getting in more trouble, or they just want the lecture to end.
But they haven't actually processed the impact or figured out what real repair looks like.
No. They haven't internalized the relational consequence. They've only internalized the required script. It actually builds reliance on the authority figure you to always define what repair looks like.
Okay, so contrast that. What's the effective engagement question?
Instead of the command, you ask something like, okay, that happened. What do you think you need to do now to repair things with your sister?
What do you think you need to do?
Yes. See how that immediately forces them to turn inward? They have to access their empathy. How did she feel? They have to access their relationship knowledge. What usually makes things better between us? And their problem-solving skills. What action can I take?
So you're prompting them to think about the impact and then devise the solution themselves.
You're guiding them to learn how to achieve genuine reconciliation, not just dictating the words.
But what happens, and this is common, right? When you ask that question, what do you think you need to do? And the answer is a shrug or mumbled nothing or even, I don't care.
Yeah, that's a critical moment. That's where the adult needs precision and, frankly, patience. You don't engage with the literal word nothing. You don't argue about whether they care or not.
But what do?
You calmly, precisely redirect back to the core issue. You might say, okay, I hear that's how you feel right now, but my question was about repair. What action is needed to start repairing the damage here?
You just hold the focus steady on their responsibility to come up with what to do.
Exactly. You maintain the focus on their agency, their responsibility to devise the solution. You're teaching them the process of conflict resolution, not just handing them the answer key.
Shifting the ownership of the solution. Okay, That connects really nicely to the next capability builder idea, which is, realizing that narrating consequences often prevents natural learning.
Yes. This one can feel radical, but it's so central to precision communication. Reality is simply a better teacher than you are.
Ouch. But okay.
Think about it. Reality is visceral. It's immediate. It's completely non-judgmental. It just is. Your commentary, your predictions about what might happen, that actually strips away the element of discovery.
And you're saying that discovery process is key.
It's essential for building genuine wisdom, not just borrowed knowledge. It's the difference between someone telling you a stove is hot and you accidentally touching it for a split second.
Right. One is information, the other is experience, embodied knowledge.
Absolutely. That experiential learning creates a much deeper, faster, multi-sensory memory connection. A verbal lecture just can't replicate that. Predicting the outcome for someone removes the necessary element of surprise or discomfort or aha that actually cements the lesson deep down.
You need that moment of realization that, that's why they said that. for it to become real wisdom you own.
Exactly. Let's revisit that classic, the forgotten jacket. The ineffective approach is the preemptive lecture, usually dripping with the parent's own anxiety. Are you sure you don't want a jacket? It looks cold. If you don't wear one, you're going to be freezing out there. You'll probably catch a cold. You'll regret it later. You'll wish you listened to me.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that monologue, maybe even given it.
Right. And what does the child actually hear? They hear the worry. They hear the nagging. The focus becomes about managing the parent's anxiety or just pushing back against the annoying persistence, not about the actual temperature outside.
Okay, so the effective approach, the one that lets reality teach, it's gotta be
Silence. Step back.
Let them forget it.
Let them make the choice. The child dashes out without the jacket. They hit the playground, the bus stop, whatever. After 10, 20 minutes, they feel it. That penetrating chill, that physical discomfort.
And that sensation is the teacher.
It's the most effective, undeniable, unarguable lesson about dressing appropriately for the weather. That visceral experience does more teaching in 5 minutes than a 15-minute lecture ever could. And the parent, ideally, stays silent. They allow the natural consequence to be the complete lesson, not just the opening act for an I told you so speech.
Okay, but this is where I need to push again for the listener too. Where's the line? Isn't there a point where letting reality teach crosses over into being negligent or causing real harm?
Absolutely crucial distinction, yes.
If the consequence isn't just being cold, but maybe something much higher stakes, forgetting to pay a bill and getting evicted, or forgetting to look before crossing the street. How do we know when to step back and when that's just dangerous?
That's the art, isn't it? You only step back when the potential consequence is, as we said before, productive, informative, and fundamentally survivable.
Survivable, okay.
If the consequence is genuinely physically harmful in a lasting way, or financially devastating, or relationally destructive beyond repair, then you don't just stand by. But, and this is key, you intervene at the level of action when necessary, not necessarily at the level of commentary.
Okay, unpack that. Action, not commentary.
Right. Let's say a teenager is about to leave for a flight and has forgotten their ID. Lecturing them for 10 minutes on the way to the airport about the importance of ID, that's ineffective commentary.
Right. White noise again.
The reality is teacher approach might be, you drive them to the airport, knowing full well they can't board. They get to the check-in counter. They experience the full, gut-wrenching reality of being denied boarding. The logistical nightmare unfolds. That's the lesson.
But you're still there?
Yes. You let the reality of the situation be the primary teacher, but you are absolutely there to help manage the recovery from that failure. You help them figure out how to rebook, how to get home, whatever. The silence we advocate for is the absence of the I told you so commentary. It's not the absence of support or presence when things go wrong.
Okay, that distinction is critical. Productive failure, survivable consequence, intervene with action, not commentary when necessary, but support the recovery.
Precisely. You're the guide setting the conditions for learning, sometimes through managed failure, not the narrator predicting every single pitfall. Trust the natural world and natural consequences to teach resilience when it's safe to do so.
Okay, so we've aimed for precision. We've used questions to build capability. We've even stepped back and let reality do some of the teaching. But what happens when the boundary gets tested anyway?
Which it will.
Right. When the learner, child or adult, keeps pushing, keeps asking why, trying to wear you down and erode that precise message you started with. We need tools for that moment. Tools that reinforce the line without dragging us back into that swamp of over-explaining.
Exactly. And this brings us to what's called the power of the redirect.
The redirect. Okay, why is that so crucial?
It's crucial because we have to correctly diagnose what's happening in that moment. When someone asks why for the fourth time about a rule you've already clearly stated, are they really seeking new information?
Probably not. It feels more like testing.
It's usually a test, a psychological probe, really.
Yeah.
They're testing your persistence, they're experimenting. If I keep pushing, will this boundary eventually wobble? Will it move?
They're checking the firmness of the authority.
Right.
And every time we re-explain, we kind of signal.
You signal, yes, it is potentially negotiable if you just apply enough verbal pressure. You're inadvertently teaching them that nagging, not acceptance, is the path to getting what they want.
Okay. So repeating the explanation actually weakens the original precise statement. It dissolves the authority into just more words.
Exactly. The redirect is designed to shut down that negotiation cycle. Cold.
Okay, we need specifics. The original script had a couple, like, asked and answered. But let's flesh this out. Give us, and you listening, a better toolkit. What are some effective redirect phrases, and why do they work?
Their power really comes from being non-explanatory. They don't engage the why at all. They just shift the focus away from debating the rule's validity and back onto the simple expectation of compliance. Let's think about maybe 3 types.
Okay, 3 types of redirects.
First, maybe the factual redirect. These are just simple, conclusive statements of fact about the discussion itself. You already know the reason. This puts the onus back on them, referencing prior clarity. Asked and answered signals the question period is officially closed. That decision is final. Simple, removes ambiguity. This isn't up for discussion right now. Clear boundary on the conversation itself.
Okay, factual, simple, closes the door on debate. What's next?
Second, maybe the process redirect. This shifts the focus immediately to what needs to happen next, away from the why. We're done talking about this. The next step is for you to state the expected action. The expectation now is compliance. What you need to be doing now is X, refocuses their energy on action.
Got it. From debating to doing.
And the third type? Third, let's call it the physical redirect. Sometimes the most powerful redirect involves minimal words paired with a clear non-verbal cue. Example, child starts pleading for more dessert after being told no. Parent says firmly, dessert time is over, and immediately turns their physical attention back to clearing the table or washing dishes. The action reinforces the verbal finality. No more engagement on that topic.
Okay, let's run a quick scenario. Teenager, curfew. You've clearly said, curfew is 10 p.m. tonight. They hit you with, but why? That's so unfair. Sarah's mom lets her stay out till 11. I'm 17.
Okay. First, deep breath. Stay calm. Recognize it's likely a test, not a genuine request for rationale at this point. You don't take the bait.
So no debating Sarah's mom's rules.
No. You might acknowledge their feelings slightly, but pivot immediately to the redirect. Maybe, I hear that feels unfair to you, but the decision for tonight is asked and answered. We expect you home by 10. Use a factual redirect.
And if they keep going, but it makes no sense.
You resist the urge to defend the logic. You might just repeat, calmly, boringly almost, asked and answered, 10 p.m., or shift to process. The discussion is over. Be home by 10.
Yeah.
You don't vary your script much. You become a broken record of finality.
The message becomes, this topic is boring now. The decision is made.
Precisely. The second you start justifying why 10 p.m. is safer or comparing family rules, you've lost. You're back in negotiation mode, rewarding their persistence with more discussion.
Right. You're teaching them inadvertently that arguing for 5 minutes buys them 5 minutes of your attention on the topic.
Exactly. The redirect communicates without yelling, without a lecture, that the door is closed, the authority is stable, the expectation stands.
Okay. Redirects are key. That leads us perfectly into the final piece, maybe the capstone of precision, silence after speaking. That idea of letting it land.
Yes. The silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's an active part of the communication. It's the punctuation mark. The most powerful component of truly effective, precise communication is often the silence that immediately follows the core statement.
And yet everything in us screams to fill that silence, doesn't it? Why is that urge so strong? And why is giving into it so damaging to the message?
Oh, the urge is huge. It usually comes from our own anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Anxiety that maybe they didn't understand, or anxiety that they're about to challenge us, so we want to preemptively build our case.
Get more arguments in before they can counter.
Yeah. But when you keep talking after you've delivered the core message, what do? You dilute the clarity, you muddy the waters. And crucially, you rob the listener of the mental space they need to actually process the instruction internally. You give them a verbal buffer, almost like a shield, that stops the stark reality of your instruction from really hitting home.
So the silence conveys confidence, while the nervous chatter conveys doubt.
Exactly. Think about it. If you deliver a precise instruction, please hang up your coat, and then immediately tack on, because you know we need to keep the hallway clear. And I nearly tripped on it yesterday. And it's important you learn to take responsibility for your things.
Okay, yeah.
You've just buried the simple core instruction under 3 justifications. What does the listener latch onto? Often the justifications. They start thinking about whether they agree with the reasons, not about the coat.
Whereas the silence after, please hang up your coat.
That silence forces their brain to grapple with the single clear command. There's nothing else to process. The silence communicates non-verbally. This message is complete. This expectation is firm. I am confident in this instruction, and the ball is now in your court. The responsibility for action rests entirely with you.
It prevents them from immediately launching into the why or the counter-argument because there's no verbal hook to grab onto.
Exactly. They have to sit with the instruction itself. They have to process it internally without you providing more noise. And that internal processing, that moment of reckoning with the expectation, that's what builds genuine compliance, respect for the boundary, and respect for the authority's word.
So it comes back to trust, doesn't it? If our aim is to raise capable, autonomous people, we have to trust that the brief, precise statement followed by intentional silence actually allows that critical internal thinking to happen.
We have to trust that precision packs more punch than verbosity.
Brevity plus confidence, anchored by silence, that equals authority.
That's the formula. #, OUTRO.
Well, this has definitely felt like a necessary evolution from our last deep dive. Moving from when not to speak to really focusing on how to make every single word count when you do.
Yeah, shifting the focus.
And the core lesson, it seems, running through everything we discussed, is that truly effective communication, the kind that builds capability and maintains authority, it's about quality, it's about efficiency.
Yeah.
It's definitely not about volume.
Absolutely. And maybe for everyone listening, the biggest takeaway is a kind of permission slip.
Permission for what?
Permission to stop feeling obligated.
Yeah.
You do not have to explain everything into the ground. You do not have to constantly defend every reasonable boundary you set. You definitely don't have to narrate every single lesson that reality could teach far more effectively.
Trusting that clarity, that brevity, it's actually more instructive than the long, detailed lecture.
Far more. We saw how over-explaining is like cognitive theft, stealing those crucial mental reps they need for executive function.
Right. And how justifying boundaries just opens the door wide for negotiation, undermining your stability.
And how just the sheer volume of constant talking turns your voice into ignorable white noise because of habituation.
So instead, the tools are using those targeted questions to force their brains to work, building capability.
Allowing reality, when safe, to be the primary teacher. Using those crisp redirects to shut down testing and negotiation.
And finally, leveraging that powerful silence after you speak, letting the precise message land with its full weight.
You tie all those pieces together, what do you get? You get an authoritative presence. A voice that, because it's used precisely and perhaps more rarely in correction mode, carries real weight. It becomes valuable.
A voice that ultimately teaches autonomy, not dependence.
That's the goal.
Which brings us, as always, to our final thought. Something for you to maybe chew on as you go about your day. If our ultimate goal truly is to raise or lead capable, independent thinkers, consider this.
How much crucial mental effort might we be unintentionally robbing them of every single day just by habitually finishing their thoughts, or by narrating the obvious consequences they're perfectly capable of discovering on their own?
So the challenge we leave you with is this. Can you find just one instance today, one moment where you normally launch into a statement, an explanation, a command, and instead replace it with a genuine capability-building question?
And then, after you ask that question or deliver that one precise statement, try embracing the silence. Just notice what that silence communicates about your confidence in your own words, yes, but maybe even more importantly, about your trust in their ability to think, process, and learn.
Here's what I want to leave you with. You don't owe explanations for every boundary. You don't owe commentary on every consequence. You don't owe lectures just because they're uncomfortable. But when you ask a question, you activate their brain. When you let reality teach, they earn the lesson. And when you redirect instead of re-explaining, the boundary holds. When you speak once and then let it breathe, your words carry weight. You don't owe a dissertation. You owe one clear statement and the space for them to think. The detached parent doesn't overfunction with words any more than with actions. So speak once, just once, and trust the process. Trust that scarcity amplifies impact. Trust that questions build capability. So when you do choose to speak, refine it. Make your words impactful. Make them count. Then let silence finish the work.